Through its peaks and struggles, the Kingdom of Vortia has survived for 200 years. That journey continues today with war, wealth, and of course, King Banta. Continue watching the journey as I play 300 days of kingdoms and castles. If you haven't seen the 100 day or 200 day video, linked down below. What seemed like a totally normal winter wasn't. Preparations for armor and weapons were ongoing. And right as spring hit, the barracks had opened for the training of knights. I tried to negotiate with the witch as I heard she was a powerful ally from some of the citizens in my kingdom. Unfortunately, she wasn't interested in talking, kind of like Queen Mazenberger, but I knew that I would be able to improve my relationship with her. The barracks had produced some fresh knights as the injured wall archers had cheered them on. It was now their time to recuperate all of the injuries that they had sustained. My ballistas had covered most of the island, but I knew that it was time to build more, as the enemies were going to get tougher and tougher. So I picked out a little clearing in the woods and started construction on a new ballista tower. I had also found a spot on the nearby coast that I could build an archer tower. Making his usual rounds, King Banta had sent a diplomat to my city. I talked to him and he asked for iron, which I kept forgetting to send him. This time I'm going to actually try and do it because I have a lot of iron. Before I do that though, let's build some roads. Ooh, that's definitely got to be karma. A giant red dragon, the biggest one I've seen yet, decided that it was time to fly right over my castle, scaring all of my citizens. There were even rumors that it had shut down the economy, and that wasn't because I was training a whole bunch of troops at the same time. Just a second later, another dragon had flew by my kingdom. This one wasn't as scary as it was a lot smaller, and we had been facing dragons like this before. The red dragon had made its way to King Banta's kingdom. My diplomats over there weren't having it, so they hopped on a transport boat and came home. Since King Banta helped me out in my times of need, I started to prepare a gift for him as he was fighting off a dragon. Wait, what the heck? The large red dragon had made its way over to my castle now, but thankfully it was almost dead. After one ballista shot, it came crashing down into a nearby forest. Unfortunately, I couldn't see all the meat that it had dropped. All that I did know was I was going to send out a search party and the whole kingdom was going to be eating good tonight. I had to pause the delivery of the gift because obviously we had to fight off a dragon, you know. But not too long after the dragon was dead, I told my workers to continue preparing it. I wanted to pay King Banta back at least a little bit. Right when I had told my diplomats to take the gift over, I just missed a trade ship. I really needed to sell some goods as I was still low on money. I then looked at my new ballista tower and realized that I could build it closer to the coast. This way, it would be able to shoot the enemies in Queen Mazenberger's kingdom, and I wouldn't even have to send troops over. My gift had arrived at King Banta's keep, and our relationship went to the best that it could be. With our friendship being so strong, I knew it was going to be kind of hard to maintain. So I was afraid that it was going to drop a little bit, but if it did, I would have some cushion. Once again, I was looking at my ballista tower, and I found even a better spot to put it. I told my workers to stop reconstructing it and cut down the trees in the better location. This is the last time, I promise. 3 Viking ships were sailing directly for my kingdom. I had told one of my transport ships to tuck in just in case they tried to attack it. The Vikings were heading straight for my coast, which didn't seem like a smart idea. This was going to be a piece of cake. That was, of course, until they turned away. I guess the ones on the left aren't my problem anymore. I immediately rushed my archers to the right side of the castle, where there actually were Vikings. There was a giant one that was marching its way directly towards my walls, a smaller, less threatening unit of axemen, and a catapult. Another giant Viking, surprisingly enough, had also snuck onto my island. My archers rained down arrows on the infantrymen and then the catapult, while my archer towers and ballistas focused on the giant Vikings. Real quick, if you're enjoying the video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for more 100-day content. It didn't take long for my valiant archers to deal with the enemies. Because of that, I was then able to place the foundations for my coastal ballista tower. I needed to start putting some pressure on Queen Mazenberger, even though I haven't started my assaults yet. When I checked on King Banta's city, it looked like he was still fighting off the Vikings. His troops were evenly matched, but he had a lot of defensive archer towers, so I knew he would be fine. I don't know what it was with these giant Vikings. You'd think you'd be able to see them a mile away, but unfortunately, another one had snuck up on my castle. We made light work of him though. I also realized that my archer towers were a little too high up. They were missing a lot of their shots on the target. So of course I took care of them by making them a little bit shorter. Wow, this is really taking a long time to build. Right when I thought the assault was over, another giant Viking had made it onto my island. I wasn't that concerned, so I continued upgrading walls while my archers and ballistas took care of him. When King Banta's ship arrived at my dock, I immediately began to trade with it. I knew I wasn't really utilizing our trade relationship in the past, so now was a good time to start. It's time to start utilizing the land outside of the castle walls. I built a road heading towards the nearby forest. I then placed down a wheat mill and a bunch of wheat farms near it. I wanted this to be another agricultural area growing lots of food. For some reason, it seemed like everybody in my city wanted to be a builder. I had to limit the amount of builder jobs that there were just so that way we could get other things done other than construction. King Banta's trade ship had arrived again. This time, it was selling fine rugs. I was thinking about buying them, but they were a little bit too pricey for me. I ended up just selling some items and turning over a profit. Right after, I started construction on a road heading to the coastal ballista tower. It seemed like people were taking a long time to walk over there, so a road would make it go quicker. Of course, right when things were going perfect, King Banta had to come over and complain about my dragon statue. He told me to destroy it or it was going to affect our relationship. Honestly, he didn't have a single say of what I could and couldn't do in my own kingdom. So of course, I told him to go back to his island. King Banta was clearly butthurt about this. His diplomats didn't even leave my castle, and they were kind of just sitting there for a while. I ended up getting back to work on my island. I tried to deforest some areas to make space for building. I honestly didn't touch the forest though that the witch was living in because I figured it would make her even more mad. I then built a really long road to the sea, put down another forester, built some palisades around my ballista tower, and chopped down some more trees. I started preparing some more troops for the war, and then out of nowhere, Queen Mazenberger had delivered her own troops to my island. She hadn't had an assault in quite a while, and honestly it was pretty weak for building up that long. After taking care of her troops with ease and strategy, I sold some fruit to the merchant ship of King Banta, and then I tried to expand my palisades around my ballista tower. Unfortunately, the architects of my kingdom told me that I wouldn't be able to build wooden structures taller than 3 stories. This made sense as the structure might be unstable, so I obviously upgraded the walls to stone. The witch was finally willing to talk to me, and she demanded that I gave her a lot of ingredients for an expensive potion. I didn't have these materials, and honestly it was enough materials to supply a whole city. There was no way I was going to give her anything. This was definitely going to make our relationship go more downhill. The coastal ballista tower was looking tall and mighty. It could even barely reach Queen Mazenberger's island. This is going to be overpowered. My spies, diplomats, in Queen Mazenberger's castle had informed me that a dragon was attacking it. This was good news because I wanted to see her downfall, but she handled the dragon with ease. Right after, it was my turn to take down a dragon. One of them rushed my castle, and they didn't even try to attack any of my towers, which was kind of surprising. King Banta then came to my castle asking me to send some troops over during the next Viking invasion. The ballista tower was finally complete. It was picking off one of the enemy archer units slowly but surely. Honestly, I would consider this a success because this was definitely going to take out a lot of enemies. I even ended up building the tower a little bit taller and then building a second ballista tower. Only 1 year remained until the next vigorous Viking assault. I sent over 2 archers to help out King Banta as he requested. I started construction on a new subdivision by placing down a house and then some roads. That was when all of the Vikings started rolling in. They seemed really coordinated for this assault as they were sailing in a perfect straight line. That's pretty hard to do. The giant Vikings were able to destroy one wall, but it was a wall right next to my gate. I honestly don't understand why they didn't take down the gate. I then continued building the subdivision by placing another house, and then I traded with King Banta's merchant. Every subdivision needed a well, so I placed one down just in case a fire would break out. They also always need a clinic. Everyone gets sick at least one point in their life, so I placed down the clinic right next to the well. Queen Banta was pretty smart. She moved all of her troops outside of the AoE of my tower. Unfortunately, this kind of pissed me off because I wasn't going to be able to hit any of them if they were standing right outside of the range. I did, however, build a road directly to the tower, so that way I could station troops on and off the ballista a lot quicker. King Banta decided to send a gift even though it wasn't really a time of need. But hey, I'm not going to complain about another free gift. I wanted to experiment with archers and boats. Obviously, if I had a bunch of archers on a bunch of boats, they'd be able to take care of any knights that would be sitting on land. I landed one of my archers on Queen Mazenberger's island as bait. Well, that worked very well. I then moved my boat into a position where the archers could only shoot the knights, but they couldn't be attacked by a tower or other archers. This is going to take a while, but it definitely could do a lot of damage. My troops were recalled, and they were sailing back to the island. I then checked on the witch to see if she was willing to talk and negotiate. Unfortunately, she was still mad after requesting a whole city's worth of supplies. Out of spite, the witch used her magic to make all of my citizens slower. Well, that wasn't very nice. The Kingdom of Vortia was now recognized by all nations as a bustling city. We definitely are expanding. Thank you to all the subscribers out there. I ended up sending some more troops over to Queen Mazenberger's island to take out the knights that were just sitting at the edge of it. I wanted to keep the economy growing, so I put down 2 more apple orchards. And that was when a giant red dragon had shot flames over Queen Mazenberger's island. It must have liked my dragon statue and decided to help out. Let's just go with that. I built a new cemetery and then destroyed the old one as I didn't want dead bodies sitting inside of the castle. The Vikings arrived at full force. Unfortunately for King Banta, they liked picking on him. There were only 2 Viking units that landed on my island. One of them was able to set one of my manors on fire, but we put it out right away and took care of them. It's always a good idea to have a lot of wells. Now that I had some more troops trained, it was time to send them over to Queen Mazenberger's island. I wanted to attack the peninsula again. Although these little flash attacks weren't going to do anything to really hurt her, it was probably very annoying. As my troops sailed to Queen Mazenberger's island, I started replacing some of my roads with stone roads. I then started to surround my new subdivision that I was building with wooden walls. I didn't want Vikings getting easy access to it. My flash attack began with my swordsman taking out one of Queen Mazenberger's buildings. This was purely to lure over any of the enemy units nearby. Once the enemy units came over, I got my troops back on the ship and sent in my archers. It was now the archers' job to take care of any of the enemies that were just sitting there being useless. These attacks weren't super effective, but I definitely was going to keep doing them until I built a large army. My troops kept luring over more and more swordsmen, and then they slowly picked them off at range. I know my castle was very heavily fortified, but I also needed to care about its aesthetics. I started placing down as many walls as I could to fill any gaps and make it look nice. I ordered some more trees to get cut down, and then I traded with Banta's merchant. My troops had finished taking out as many of the swordsmen that they could. I then sent them to go and explore near Queen Mazenberger's secret part of the island. It looked like she had a whole civilization over here that I didn't even know about. The area was too hot to keep exploring, So I got my archers out of there and sent them back home. Once my troops arrived back at home, I realized that King Banta had sent another diplomat. He was just saying thank you for helping him out with the last Viking invasion. I then built some wheat farms and watched King Banta send his troops to get senselessly slaughtered. I don't know why he would send them right into that death trap. My building spree then continued. I destroyed a house and then built 2 more of them. I also threw down a whole bunch of walls. A Viking catapult unit rudely interrupted me while I was trying to figure out more buildings to place. I sent my knights over to give them a warm welcome to the island. Once I had my peace and quiet, I tried placing a Noria. It seemed like you could only place them on certain areas of the coast, which didn't really make a lot of sense to me. I placed one down though, and I ended up building a tavern as well. I also threw down a library right in the new subdivision area I was building. I went to go check out the housing area inside of my castle. I moved one of the manors back, so that way I could build a lot more buildings. That was when the witch casted a plague upon my city. Unfortunately, it seemed like quite a few people died, but we had a lot of good doctors and took care of things. When I said building spree, I wasn't joking. I then built a well, a library, and then planned out an area for a new gate, and I put a bunch of stairs around my kingdom just so that way people could get onto the walls easier. I had destroyed one of the outer walls and put a gate right where I was planning it. I then put a fish preparation station because I wanted my citizens to have a more balanced diet. Also, it would make them happier. It seemed like a lot of the housing areas were already having an increased amount of happiness. I then placed down some more wooden walls, built a fisher hut, and encountered some more Vikings and dragons. It's weird to think that Vikings and dragons was becoming a norm in this world. I did fight them off all the time, however. Unsurprisingly enough, King Banta asked me to send over some troops before the next Viking invasion. I then placed a marketplace in the center of all the houses that I was building. I had gotten this strategy from a loyal citizen named Snowy. They knew a lot about city building, so I definitely was going to take their advice. Wow, my army's starting to really build up. I built some more roads to make the island more accessible, and then some more wheat farms so that way we'd have more food. And surely enough, I destroyed the dragon statue so that way I could build a bathhouse, something that my citizens had been requesting. King Banta sure would be happy. Having a bathhouse means that you have to have a steady source of water. So, from my Noria, I built some aqueducts to go straight to the bathhouse. Unfortunately, they were kind of blocking the road, which was a little bit awkward, but people could still walk on the road. I knew I needed more archer towers around my island. So I found a location, sent some archers to take out the wolf dens nearby, and then built one. Alright, well that's enough building inside the city. My people seemed pretty happy and they were getting even happier. So, it was time to focus on my fleet and military. King Banta must have known my plan because he sent me some supplies to get started. I had to put down a stockpile because I was getting way too many resources. Oh, and also there was a barbarian invasion going on. Some of my walls caught on fire, but it really wasn't a big deal. The time had finally come. I had a decent amount of troops, and I knew that I could deal some damage to Queen Mazenberger's city. I knew if I wanted to do any real damage, I would have to train even more troops. But I wanted to get my current ones in the field and start doing damage to get my revenge on Queen Mazenberger. Once the boats were loaded up, they headed out to her island. I wanted to employ the same strategy that I used before, sending in some bait and then taking out the enemies with my archers. Everything was going according to plan. King Banta had even sent over some troops while I was attacking. This is gonna be good. Well, it could have been good, but sadly, King Banta had sent his troops into the same death trap that he did the first time. My archers weren't close enough to assist yet, so it seemed like a lot of his troops ended up dying before I was even able to get my forces near. He did, however, have 2 catapults still on the island. This was a dub. I let off a unit of my swordsmen, and they started raiding houses. How do things feel now, Queen Mazenberger? I honestly had secured a landing spot for me and King Banta's troops on the island. Any enemies that Queen Mazenberger threw at us, they immediately got nailed by my arrows. I traded with Banta's merchant to get more gold, and then I started training some more troops. At the same time, I sent one of my diplomats over to go talk to King Banta real quick. Unfortunately, he got really upset with me and said that I didn't help out in the last Viking invasion. I honestly did not have time for this, so I headed back over to Queen Mazenberger's island, and it looked like there were a crap ton of corpses all over it. The war was taking its toll. I then loaded up the swordsmen that I was training on a transport boat and started to send them over to Queen Mazenberger's island. The troops made it there, slowly but steadily. They also took some arrows from the enemy archer towers on the coasts. But now, my troops were reinforced, and it was time to start doing more damage. I rushed my swordsmen to the shore, and a bunch of enemy swordsmen made their way over. We had a clear advantage because I had so much archer's support. The enemy swordsmen didn't last for long, and they all just started to run away once their troops got low on health. Unfortunately, I overextended. My soldiers had been lured in by some enemies, and they got taken out pretty quickly. I knew that it was time to retreat because I was going to need a much bigger army if I really wanted to take on Queen Mazenberger. I watched my troops sail back to the Kingdom of Vortia, and wow, did they look cool. Once they had arrived, a lot of them returned to their post on the castle wall. They were celebrated by all of the citizens and got a good returning home. More Vikings decided to roll up to our islands, and King Banta attacked Queen Mazenberger with another assault. He had a decent amount of troops, but it wasn't going to be enough. I wonder how far he's going to get. My army wasn't the biggest army out there, but they definitely did look very cool. Immediately when I got my troops back home, King Banta had sent a diplomat asking me if I could help him out in the next Viking invasion. I of course agreed. I then had my diplomat go around and scout out Queen Mazenberger's island to assess the damage. I sent some troops over to King Banta's island to help out with the remaining Vikings. That was when two ferocious dragons came and attacked my castle. One of them got very low and started flying away. He escaped with almost no health, and then the second dragon lit one of my archer towers on fire. The nasty beast continued its assault on my castle and lit even another archer tower on fire. Both of them had been completely destroyed by this point. Despite all the damage that the dragon caused, it fled. I don't know if it was scared or what, but it was completely gone, and I no longer had to deal with it. I made some city renovations, like placing down a marketplace and looking for an area to create a new subdivision. I also built a well in an area that wasn't really covered by water, just in case anything ever caught on fire, of course. It was time to start loading my troops back up into the transport ships and send them out for round 2. I had recruited even more troops, and it was time to send them out for a second assault. I had 6 ships ready to depart and go and attack Queen Mazenberger's island. Of course, that's where I sent them to. This was a lot bigger than any attack that Queen Mazenberger had ever done herself. She usually only sent 3 full ships. She couldn't do anything about these 6 that were heading towards her island and were about to cause a whole bunch of damage. Attack! I beached my swordsmen and made them start attacking the one tower closest to them. It seemed like Queen Mazenberger was prepared and had a whole bunch of archers and swordsmen ready to fight. I then told my swordsmen to get back onto the ship, and a huge archer war had broken out. Arrows were flying like crazy, and I was winning because I had a lot more archers. Who would have thought that archers would have been this powerful? Queen Mazenberger had sent over some catapults after I had taken out her infantry and arrowmen. It seemed like these were kind of her last resort, and they honestly weren't doing anything. Once the catapults were dealt with, I sent my swordsmen in to start attacking their theater. An archer tower was covering that area though, so I had to retreat them pretty quickly and refocus on objectives that weren't covered by archer towers. Queen Mazenberger had been producing more units, and it looked like she was sending them over one by one. This was not the smartest idea on her part, as I just mowed them down when they arrived. Having catapults was overpowered. They were able to destroy buildings from far away without even having to take damage themselves. I went back to check on my island and sold some items to King Banta's merchant. I realized that I was running out of gold. This was due to my excessive military funding. These troops costed a lot in maintenance, not gonna lie. I knew that I was gonna have to send the rest of my troops back home. Unfortunately, I needed a better economy to continue this assault. I sent my catapults in to try and do as much damage as they could before we had to depart. King Banta also had one catapult on the island, and I have no idea where it really came from. But I wasn't going to complain, and we were just destroying buildings together. I'm sure Queen Mazenberger was getting very nervous as we were destroying buildings right outside of her first wall. Luckily enough for her, King Banta started retreating his catapults, and I started sending mine back to the boats. It was time to head back to the Kingdom of Vortia and replenish my troops and build our economy so we could host a bigger army. My diplomats were talking to King Banta, and he got very mad at them. He said that we didn't help him out in the last Viking invasion, which was very weird. He had just asked us to help him out in the next Viking invasion, but it didn't even happen yet. We still had one more year to help. As good of an ally King Banta is, he started to confuse me honestly. My troops had arrived home, and I noticed that we had almost no money, and the happiness went down like crazy. I told my workers to start working in the aqueducts, so that way the bathhouse would turn back on. That would make everyone a lot happier. I then told my troops to retake their original positions on the walls. I was planning on healing them, but I couldn't heal them all at the same exact time. Sure enough, it was time for the Vikings to come and attack us. I sent my troops to actually go out and face them. It seemed like they were trying to avoid my island again. My archers made it to the coast and started lighting up a random Viking boat. We got its health super low, but unfortunately it escaped. This time the enemies were running from us. They didn't want to even see our power. The economy was struggling. We had almost run out of money completely. So I knew that I had to disband some of my troops to get some citizens back and get them working jobs that would produce more money. In addition to disbanding troops, I also sold some of my items on King Banta's merchant ship, and then I told my men to stop manning their archer towers so that way they could do some more jobs helping the economy. Things were getting desperate, so I even disbanded 2 of my catapults so that way I had more workers. Sure enough, with all the precautions that I was taking in my city, the happiness started to rise again. I started to catch a break. A giant red dragon had been flying past one of my towns, and we had all noticed it because of its loud roars. Thankfully, one of my ballista towers was able to shoot it down, and I sent some scouts out to go and grab all of the meat that it dropped. This would surely help out my happiness temporarily. I also tried resetting up my merchant ship, but for some reason I couldn't figure it out. I had items being brought to the docks, and then I told my merchant ship to pick some of them up. King Banta had sent over another diplomat, and he was mad at me again. He said that I didn't help him out in the last Viking raid, but then he said that I did help him out with something else, so he was happy again. He was honestly going kinda crazy. Once my merchant boat had arrived at King Banta's dock, I stopped it and tried selling goods. Unfortunately, things weren't working out. Nothing was selling. I was gonna have to talk to some of my advisors to figure out what's going on and what I was doing wrong. I then once again traded with one of King Banta's merchant ships, and I knew that I needed to make improvements in my city so that way it could produce gold a lot more efficiently. So I started off with some infrastructure. I started upgrading a lot of roads to stone, so that way people would be able to travel a lot faster through and outside of my city. The witch was finally willing to talk to me, and she requested a decent amount of materials. This time I actually had them, so I had my citizens start bringing them over. I then started to think, and I realized that when we killed dragons and got their meat, my citizens became very happy. So it would make sense to put down a pig raising farm, and that way I could use the pig meat to make my citizens even more happy. In addition to the new pig farm, I placed down a butcher shop and then started destroying some trees to expand my castle near the witch. Hopefully she doesn't get too pissed about this. I scouted out Queen Mazenberger's kingdom and how many troops she was building with my diplomat. Honestly, she wasn't making that much progress. I then placed down another manor and another pig farm. Also, I placed down another wheat farm to make my pigs eat more food. This way, they'd produce more meat. Some Vikings started to attack, and I sent some archers out to go and help King Banta, and I honestly just planned on keeping them there because I knew that he was going to keep complaining and keep asking for help. It just made sense to have them stay over there. The Vikings weren't a challenge, and I was able to take them out with my archers and towers with ease. They honestly weren't scary anymore. King Banta had also sent over a gift for helping him out. I came up with an idea of wrapping my whole island with stone walls. This way, no enemies could even land on it, and I could just sink their boats before they even got close. This was an extremely large project, but honestly, I had a lot of stone, and I had the means to do it. I started to dislike the idea of having a graveyard right next to my food production, so I moved the cemetery over to the other side of the castle. It was near a bunch of residential houses, so it made more sense there. I connected some roads, upgraded my food storages, and even built some more walls along the outskirts of my island. I continued a bunch of upgrades here and there, and I honestly was just doing a bunch of waiting for my builders to construct everything. Things were going smooth and my happiness was definitely increasing. It's always a good feeling when you know that your kingdom is flourishing and you'll be able to build a bigger army.